Well, welcome back to Open to Truth, a podcast all about exploring big ideas and discovering truth together. My name's Clint.
Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome back.
And today we would like to talk about transgenderism. And
oh my gosh.
I said the word.
Even just saying the word.
I said it publicly.
Yeah, you did.
I actually just recorded yesterday with some of the staff that we work with at church a whole podcast about this. And just for what that podcast is and what we're trying to do with the congregation, there are some filaments of the conversation that we couldn't quite get to. And so it's just been on my mind all week.
Yeah.
And honestly, for years.
Yeah.
Given the prominence that this discussion has had in the culture.
Yeah. And in church world as well. Like you and I both live and breathe, you know, Christianity, the church world. And there's certainly been a topic of discussion there. So I would just say up front, we recognize there's a great deal of sensitivity around this issue. And so
neither of us are
right. We are not transgender. So, I hope that this discussion will be exemplary in the intellectual virtues, that we can have it reasonably, charitably, carefully, thoughtfully. It is not our goal at all to offend in any way. But as lovers of the truth and thinkers, and we believe that thinking happens best in dialogue, where we can bounce ideas off each other and try to help make sense of this stuff. So
in pursuit of having, sometimes we use that analogy on the show of the book of all truths, and I would like to, find out more about what's in that book. And we are trying to do that through discussion.
Yeah.
I have listened to, I don't know anyone personally, but over other podcasts, people who are transgender sharing their experience. I recognize that I don't have firsthand acquaintance with what it's like of experiencing transgenderism or gender dysphoria, and we can get into all these different terms. But if you wouldn't mind extending a bit of grace to us as we, this isn't the words like cup and table and apple I can use really well in a sentence and not offend anyone.
Right.
But these terms are so laden.
There's landmines everywhere.
Yeah.
And we may step on some today.
Yeah. So while I am trying to dodge the tripwires, at the same time, though, I do kind of want to speak freely and not worry too much about all of that. And just if you just can know my heart, I want to understand it well.
Yeah.
And forgive me if I misuse a term, misapply or misgender in some way.
Yeah. It's bound to happen. So
it may happen. Yeah.
But if you're willing to put up with a little bit of that, and you're not going to get triggered and all upset, then by all means, come along for the ride. And if there's stuff that we miss, this is always the case with our show. We want this to be more than just a conversation between me and Clint. If you have something to add, if you are a transgender person and we are clearly missing a perspective and you can charitably and gracefully offer that perspective to us, we would welcome it. We would love to hear what you have to add to the conversation, because we certainly don't claim to know it all. We could use your help outside perspectives. Yeah. So where do you want to start?
Man, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. I'm tempted to start with the terms, but that's kind of my go-to thing.
Just defining terms off the bat. Yeah.
Which can itself, that could take a while to button down and may even be like one of the flashpoints in the broader discussion at all. But let's start here.
Okay.
The term transgenderism, it's using that little word in there, gender. What is that?
Yeah.
What is gender? And is it different from sex? Why is it not called transsexism?
Yeah.
So I think I would have maybe 5 years ago, definitely 5 years ago, I would have thought sex and gender are the same thing. I think. Or 10 years ago or something.
Yeah.
I'm still tempted to think that, but I'm starting, I think, to get what people mean by gender being something else than that. And again, another point, just whether it's a preamble or not, with these terms that people are throwing around in the discussion, just because a term has been offered doesn't necessarily mean that it picks out something genuine in the world or that you absolutely have to make room for it in your broader worldview on the topic. I don't know. Gender non-binary is something we can get to later, but like, even I might understand what you're saying with that. I don't, just because a term has been offered doesn't mean you have to take that on and make space for it in the worldview. Does that kind of make sense? Or?
Yeah, that makes sense. So are you saying that over the past however many years, 5-10 years, your thinking on it has changed a little bit from gender and sex being the same thing?
And I think insofar as just in my spheres of my social spheres, I wasn't really encountering this discussion prior to that.
Yeah.
And so I thought they were synonymous.
They were kind of used synonymously for a long time. Yeah.
I think you could probably still find it on like government documents and stuff.
Yeah, I think you could.
I don't think it's totally trickled down onto every little piece of paper that there would be these separate categories.
Yep.
But let's take a stab at it. Here's a stab.
Yep.
Sex is the biological underpinnings. Maybe your genetics, your anatomy are determined in some way. So like the primary and secondary sexual characteristics, the primary being the gonads, and the external bits, whereas the secondary sex characteristics would be what you get during puberty and post.
Sure.
Whatever the collection of those are, you know what those mean.
Yep.
So, and then along with that, like, why did those develop? Well, there's these sex chromosomes in the human genome. I get one of each from my parents. I can be an XX or an XY for the most part. And then that leads to the development of these primary and secondary sex characteristics. That is all like, that's sex to me in this discussion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yes.
Is that controversial?
I don't think so. Or at least there needs to be a word to refer to the biological underpinnings.
Maybe that's what I was trying to say too. Is like, whatever damn word you want to use for any of this stuff, like that. That's a thing.
We want to refer to biology.
Yeah.
And we're going to do that with the word sex.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
That makes sense.
What else on that? Oh, and just briefly, I said for the most part. You're like, what do you mean? Well, there are these extremely rare cases where you can get two X's and a Y. I think that's Klinefelter syndrome.
Okay. Wow.
And feel free to Google that. Like, intersex it's an actual medical phenomenon. It's not something you just read on a blog somewhere and made up. People really have this, and it's sad. Usually means infertility, and there's a whole list of them.
Sorry, is this you have both male and female genitalia, or
it can be
okay,
or they just both they fail to develop at all.
Right.
In some cases, I think you can have 3 X's, X, Y, Y.
Wow.
There's just a lot of different combinations of X and Y that you can have that really, goof up what the body is typically supposed
to do.
Pretty
rare, those conditions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that is a fertile ground, that whole intersex arena. Now the doors, for me, get blown wide open for what do we do with that?
Yeah.
But because it's such a small case, I don't necessarily want to make a rule about how to think about all of gender and all of sex based on these little
outliers. Yes.
So for the most part, I think you get what we're saying with sex. Now the word gender.
Yeah.
Okay, so for a long time, I think most of us would have said, oh, that's synonymous with what you've been talking about. But at least for I have up here on the laptop just a few notes. Some of you have heard of the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And they have a whole section in here on gender dysphoria. I'd encourage you. It's really interesting. Like, it's from the American Psychiatric Association.
Yeah.
A board, a collection of professional psychiatrists have gotten together and designed this manual to help people diagnose and give statistics on these things.
Right.
And part of how they describe the distinction, so they talk about sex just in the way that we just did. And then gender would be the public-facing social aspect of this. So the way that you present yourself to the world.
Can I? Mm-hmm. Is it the public facing how you present to the world, or is it the felt experience of being male or female?
That,
because again, broadly speaking, when I think about or somebody suffering with gender dysphoria, I'm thinking that is, I feel like a woman trapped in the body of a man. And regardless of how I present publicly or how I, come across to other people, I have this internal sense that I am female, but it doesn't match my biology. So, are you saying...
Can we set that aside, the felt expression?
Sure.
So I think if again, the words, I don't know if I even really care about the words.
Right.
It's the phenomenon.
Yep.
But they're saying here, let me just read from the DSM.
Yeah.
Thus, there's a whole thing before it. Thus, gender is used to denote the public and usually legally recognized lived role as boy or girl, man or woman. But in contrast to certain social constructionist theories where gender is just a social construct, biological factors are seen as contributing in interaction with social and psychological factors to gender development. Right. So here's kind of the story that I take from that. My parents had sex, and I was given some sex chromosomes. And through the normal, maybe we don't like that yet, but the normal development through that, I get some certain gonads. And then later on, I get certain secondary sex characteristics. And I began to live a role. I'm playing a role in society as one of these two genders. Wait a minute. I know, like two. Just hold on.
Yep.
Male or female, boy or girl, man, woman. And that's how I'm expressing myself to others around me. That might also, so the interplay there with societal expectations for what boys and girls ought to be doing or how they ought to dress on this bell curve. I think all of that is your gender, the lived role
in society.
Sure.
That does sound similar to a social construct. What's the difference there?
Because they're saying that biological factors contribute to it. Right. So this ties into what maybe a character like Jordan Peterson has gotten flack for with pointing out gender differences on the Big Five personality test.
Yeah.
So there's something, we don't fully understand it.
But they're biologically grounded.
Yeah, there's certain, just by the mere fact that statistically, huge big data statistics, women tend to score higher on neuroticism and agreeableness on the Big Five personality test.
Yeah.
Across cultures, and there's tons of studies on this. It's really pretty easy to find.
Yep.
And all different age groups. So, why is that? Well, we're biologically different, so maybe it stems from that. And they've demonstrated a certain amount of heritability. We did a whole podcast on that earlier about that topic. So about heritability and what that means. But yeah, it seems like there's biological underpinnings for how men and women participate in that lived role in society. I think that's different from saying that everything about it is forced upon you by society.
Social construct.
It may be that there are good reasons or good biological explanations for why these things develop the way they do.
Yeah. So
does that help? Can we use that moving sex and gender? Or is that so you brought up the felt experience piece.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking this might be one of the cases where a word's meaning has just changed over time, as language tends to do. There will always be a word to refer to some phenomenon, and maybe for years, gender did refer to biological sexuality, and now in the last decade or so, that word has begun to be used differently to refer to the public-facing role that you play in society.
So just a couple of sentences earlier from the bit I just read a moment ago says this: the need to introduce the term gender arose with the realization that for individuals with conflicting or ambiguous biological indicators of sex, the intersex category we spoke of, Klinefelter's, the lived role in society and or the identification as male or female could not be universally associated from those biological factors.
Yeah.
So we started to get, like, I mean, just as modernity moves on, more and more information is spread, we can find out more of these stories, and the stories of intersex people become more prominent. You're like, oh wow, how do we think of this?
How do we categorize it?
They have ambiguous gonads.
Yeah.
And ambiguous secondary characteristics. What kind of role should they play?
Yeah.
Shall they play the role of male or female? And that, I think, kind of kickstarted the discussion. Okay, we need a different word for that. Gender. That was already kind of being used. Let's make sex the biological stuff. We all get that. And gender is now the lived role. And so, typically, if you are sexually male, you will live out this lived role as male. But now, here's the tricky part, is what in the world is that? What's a lived male role?
Yeah.
Because the reason that gives me pause is I'm not super well traveled. There's a lot of people that have traveled more than I have. But even in my limited travel, I have seen masculinity, maybe is that fair to bring up at this point, look differently, or lived male roles. I view those as similar.
You view those as the same thing? So let's maybe distinguish. Maleness is not the same thing as masculinity. Femaleness is not the same thing as femininity. Would you agree with that? Like, when I think about the terms masculine and feminine, I think there are certain behavioral or temperamental traits that we tend to associate more with males, generally speaking, or females, generally speaking.
And so for you, males and females is the sex category.
The sex category.
Okay.
But masculinity and femininity, I think, are words that describe a set of behaviors most typically seen in males or in females, but not exclusively. It has to be, obviously, a Venn diagram with some overlap there. But like you were saying, those big five traits, like aggression, is going to typically be higher in males. And we've sort of lumped that in the category of aggression is sort of a male thing. Not that females can't be aggressive. Not that some females aren't way more aggressive than certain males. That's certainly the case. But, I think of masculinity and femininity almost as just like circles we've drawn around different traits, almost arbitrarily, but mostly because of where we see those in terms of biological sex manifesting them. So how do we get on that? What were you just equating to masculinity and femininity?
Well, I was trying to say that the lived gender roles and masculinity, maybe those are different, but just for a moment, they don't seem fixed across cultures. The masculinity, the thing we've been talking, I do agree that the big five studies indicate that there's gender differences cross-culturally. But there are other maybe peripheral attributes that are not cross-culture.
Like, do you have examples?
Yeah, so I don't know. In the American South, there's like the country song trope of, I think of the country Southern dude. Like,
he drives a truck, he drinks beer,
wears denim.
He loves his wife. He
Yeah.
drinks whiskey. Yeah.
You can picture this kind of
I got
trope.
him. There he is in my head.
You have him.
Yeah.
It's Garth Brooks.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So, and you can kind of characterize, and then what's a man in Seattle like?
Wow. I think he wears a cardigan and a scarf. And he probably has glasses.
Maybe a little more put together. I don't know.
He carries a leather satchel that has a MacBook in it, and he visits coffee shops.
So we could continue this experiment all over the place, and there'd be these slight differences. But in terms of the big five, okay, agreed that there's a handhold there for some biologically undergirded gender differences.
Yeah.
Now, okay, where to go from here? So we've just kind of been defining some terms. We started with the word transgenderism.
Yep.
And so even that word now, given what we've said so far, is, to me, strikes me as a little bit of a misnomer.
Where gender is defining societal role.
Here's what I want to say. Let me see how this strikes you.
Go.
Those who get upset at the topic of transgenderism and think that it's ridiculous, I think are like, you can't just become a female whenever one wants. Like, you either are a male or you are a female. There's no changing that from the biological sex aspect of the chromosomal makeup.
Yeah, it goes right down to the bottom of things. Yeah.
So that's why it's almost like that person might be thinking of it as transsexism.
Yes. Which, that was a word that was used for a while, right?
I don't know.
Transsexual?
That's a word.
I've heard it. I've heard that word.
Not as much anymore.
Not so common these days. Yeah.
So, and I think I'm sympathetic with that view.
Yeah.
I happen to think that it might be just a technology issue. We can't change the chromosomes. Can't change the chromosomes.
Yeah.
And that is what's giving rise to the phenotype, the outward, secondary, primary characteristics.
Yes.
Like, you could lop off the gonads or reform them into something else, but you haven't changed the factoid in the book of all truths that you are a male or a female, and in the sex compartment.
And going back to the point of, like, we just want a word that refers to chromosomes, and what's going on with the chromosomes, and that word is sex at this point. But, so even if we were to do away with that, some new word would emerge to refer to chromosome identity.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
Yeah.
But if you just take it at face value, the transgenderism, how we've been talking about gender from the DSM, don't shoot the messenger, is you are then trans across or changing the gender, changing the lived role.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. Why that to me feels, at least from the legal standpoint, we can wonder, let's save like Christianity and ethics to the end until we understand what we're talking about. But the legality and like the freedom loving American in me says, okay, like whatever lived role you want to do, if you don't want to conform to the typical stereotypes in the geographical region you're in, if you want to buck the trends of the Big Five,
if you want to dress like a cowboy in Seattle, you can. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you might be castigated for it.
But welcome to America. You can do that. Yeah. Okay.
So when I consider transgenderism on that front, and if that's what everyone's talking about, like, hey, I want to have a different lived role. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's when
no issue with that.
I don't have any
ethical issue. No.
I don't know about that yet.
Okay.
The ethics part. Let's again save that. But just like conceptually, I'd have no.
You should have the freedom to do that.
I have no quarrel with the idea of it.
Yeah. In the same way, you can choose a career path and choose who you associate with and how you dress and.
But my worry, and I think others share the worry, is that this is not the claim being made.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's that they're confusing that. Sorry if that sounds arrogant, with the transsexual idea. Again, that's fallen out of favor, that term.
Yeah.
But the idea of I am now a female, even though I was assigned male at birth.
Right.
That does not make as much sense to me. But I feel like that's the cultural phenomenon that we're seeing all the time. So let's take, everyone knows about Caitlyn Jenner, right? Mm-hmm. So Bruce Jenner was this individual who won a lot of, I think, gold medals, this famous Olympian, and then is reporting to everyone that I am a woman. I happen to have this male body. I'd like you to call me Caitlyn and the rest of it, right? So I'm transgender. And this person now, Caitlin, as they'd like to be referred to, or I don't know, right?
Yep.
But is living out the role of a woman.
Yes.
Just that is a fact. No, incontrovertible, is living out a woman role. But I don't think that individual, that Homo sapien over there, is a female.
Mm-hmm.
That's a male. You can't change the sex.
Yeah.
And what sucks is that I feel like, I don't know if this podcast is popular enough yet to have a wide enough berth of people that would be upset with that.
Yeah.
But I think they would be if it were.
Yeah.
That I'd be bigoted or hateful just for that idea. You're denying her felt experience. And like, well, no. I'm just trying to understand the terms we're using. I'm genuinely I don't think that you can change your sex. If that's what you know what
I do know what you mean.
I feel like I'm repeating myself.
No, I'm following you. Sorry, I just got hung up on thinking about, in terms of these roles. You said she is living a woman's life, or presenting as a female or a woman.
That
the
seems
role.
right? Or no?
Yeah, but I'm even just wondering, what is that a spectrum? The various roles we play, and who says what's a masculine role and what's a feminine role? Or does it just go back to that we sort of associate aggression with maleness and I don't know, whatever else with femaleness?
Well, dude, and I don't know the full history on this. I wish I was more astute on it. But then you have this whole other phenomenon of feminism, and that's a better student of history would know this better, but there's like first wave, second wave, third wave feminism.
Yep.
And it's been really interesting to watch the cultural dialogue. Like, these two things are kind of smashing into each other.
Right.
Because even as I say, like, a woman lived role, like, I could see...
I could see people being offended by that.
A feminist saying, like, what? You think what it means to be a woman is wearing dresses and makeup and long hair?
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And certainly there are feminists that are trying to buck those societal norms. And I've known women, particularly from my academia days, that are like, I do not wear high heels.
Reject that.
I do not wear makeup. Those were designed to please men.
Don't want to be seen as a girly girl. Right. Yeah. Yeah, those two things seem at odds.
So I don't know what really to make of that.
Yeah.
But at least let's not get too bogged down with feminism. Trying to understand transgenderism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see happening, like in this case of Caitlyn Jenner. Obviously very far removed from her. I don't know that person personally.
Yeah.
But is presenting as female. At least self-reporting that way.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. According to her.
So, where do we stand now? That's how I guess that's my summary statement on the word transgenderism and how I think it is being misused by nearly everybody.
Yeah.
And is that crazy to think? I mean,
no, I think the way you laid it out makes sense.
Okay.
I'm wondering, what are the implications for interacting with and relating well with transgender folks who maybe are misusing the term or are...
Well, here's another way that because you brought up, like, when you said male and female, you're like, I mean the sex part.
Yes.
That's another way of we all get confused with each other because not everyone thinks that.
Right.
I think they mean male and female to mean gender sometimes.
Yes, the role in society.
And then now Clinton, not that you need my permission, right? But now I suddenly become okay with it. Like, oh, if you mean gender, then and the lived role,
have at it.
By all means.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if that sex part can be changed.
Are we all just talking past each other?
I do think
here in
a lot of that
2021.
Yes.
It's like, if we could just get clear on our terms, it might help.
I do think this.
Yeah. Now, but you did say a moment ago that you suspect there'd be a large swath of people who might be offended at the notion that you can't change your sex or can't change How did you say it earlier?
Yeah, you're denying my felt experience.
No, I am female.
Yeah, and you brought up the one of the explanations that's given is that I, like, for instance, I'm a female soul in a male body.
Yep.
Well, now
it's a whole other can of
that's a
worms.
whole other podcast on what is a freaking soul.
Mm-hmm. Can they be gendered?
Can they be gendered?
Or sexed?
See,
yep.
And again,
I see.
I tend to think no.
Right.
That sex is a biological thing that gives rise to a gender along with social influence, which again, those social influences are also undergirded by biology.
Yeah. Right.
And that the soul, if such a thing is real, would be something a bit more abstract than
it would sort of
the nuances
transcend the biology in some way. Yeah.
So that explanation has always been mystifying to me.
I'm not wishing to suffer from gender dysphoria, but I do kind of wish I could have at least a taste of what that texture is like. Like, I don't know. I just don't know what it would be like to have that felt experience of this mismatch between who I feel myself to be, either as in my gender or societal role. I guess that's what it means, and my biology.
Okay, good. So now I think we're now ready to shift over to another whole, if we're turning the gem here, looking at a different angle on it. And that is the, what kind of, is it, should we give this normative or non-normative status in society? The being transgender. I think there are quite a bit of media artifacts, shows, movies, where this is very celebrated. It's a great thing that you have found your true self, you're imprisoned in this thing that you don't like, and now you're fully able to blossom into who you really are. And before we just give the final verdict on that, I think everyone, of course not, but some might disagree, but I'm looking at the DSM, here is gender dysphoria. This is listed as the manual of mental disorders.
Yeah.
We can have a whole discussion on what a mental disorder is. That's hotly contested. But here is the most recent, up-to-date manual of mental disorders that human beings have collected. The professionals have a way of thinking about mental disorder. Here is one of them, gender dysphoria. Allow me to read some of the things about it.
Sure.
A marked incongruence between one's experienced or expressed gender of at least 6 months duration, as manifested by at least 2 of the following 6 things. Okay, here they are. A marked incongruence between one's experienced expressed gender and primary or secondary sex characteristics. So I have this experience that's incongruent with gonads and breasts or something. A strong desire to be rid of one's primary or secondary sex characteristics because of that marked incongruence. A strong desire for the sex characteristics of the other gender. A strong desire to be of the other gender, or some alternative gender different from one's assigned gender. A strong desire to be treated as the other gender, socially. A strong conviction that one has the typical feelings and reactions of the other gender.
And here, gender is societal role.
Yes, that's what they mean.
Right.
So that is gender dysphoria. I am displeased with the gender that I have. And remember, in their view, the gender, again, that lived role, that does have biological underpinnings. So it's not totally social construction.
Right.
And so my question is, I genuinely don't know for sure, but is everyone that would identify as transgender suffering from gender dysphoria?
Right.
I think so.
Well, I'm wondering, I feel like I'm actually a little more confused.
Okay.
Which is not the direction we want to go with these conversations, but the way that we're defining gender as being this societal role, public-facing role, would we say then that it's, and we said, you've got all the freedom in the world to live whatever role you want, right? Does that mean gender is fluid? You just, tomorrow I want to live the role of a woman, and that's fine. I can do that. I'm not a woman. I am still male.
Are you trying to get to the ethics part right now, or
no? I'm trying to.
That is a So you brought, there's this category gender fluid, and some people would identify that way. I'm gender fluid.
What is that? What's that?
That means that I like to, or I have this need
I
to
oscillate between different roles.
And it may be non-binary. We haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But that there might be other options besides the male gender. Again, sorry about male sex, male gender, female gender.
Yep. Well, that does seem to make sense to me, unless I'm not thinking about it clearly. If that's the case, that we're talking about social roles.
But not everyone who says that means that. And that's what I was trying to get at earlier.
Yeah.
And maybe we just got to the crux of the matter earlier than we thought. But
yeah,
I do think that's a huge part of this is we're talking past each other. Some people are saying, like, I'm a man today and I can be a woman the next day.
Yeah.
And I think they mean, like, period, end of sentence. Everything that you want to lump into whatever it means to be man, I can be that now and something else later. Right. And we want to resist that.
I want to resist that.
I think well-thinking people want to resist that notion if we care at all about biological truth.
Yeah.
So help me God. I don't know.
Yeah. But these roles that we play, that does seem to me to be a spectrum of your stereotypical most masculine role you can think of.
And to iterate,
Seattle guy, woman on this end. Pick your role, go for it, whatever you want to do. And in that sense, aren't we all gender fluid? But you're saying those roles have biological underpinnings. I think there is some link there that you've been mentioning.
It's not a pure accident of the history of social interaction.
Yep.
That individuals who have the sex characteristics of males tend to exhibit on the bell curve these kind of traits, and the same for women.
Yeah.
That is not purely nurture,
right?
Let's say.
Right. Yes.
They are heritable.
Yep. Okay.
Genetically influenced.
So I guess
are different because men and women are different biologically.
Yes.
Okay. So gender dysphoria then, just to circle back, is all these different a lot of these say a strong desire. So you have this psychological, like it's a psychiatric thing. Yeah. So I have this mental, I have this psychological need to want to be rid of my sex characteristics, or I like what I see over there and I wish I was more like that.
Yeah.
So dysphoria, displeasure. I don't have the feeling of comfort with the assigned gender.
That's got to be horrible to live with.
Right.
I can't imagine.
Really sad.
Yeah. To hate your own body and biology in that way, or reject it, or feel like it is unnatural. That would be horrible to live with that.
So my intuition then is that if someone is saying that they're transgender, then you must have gender dysphoria. If you don't, you want to change the gender you are.
Yeah.
Why do you want to do that?
Yeah.
Probably because of some stress or felt need, because it's a very difficult thing to be doing.
Yeah.
You will experience some amount of social negative pressure. For doing this, because it is weird. Yeah. In the sense and the statistical, it just doesn't happen often.
Uncommon.
That's what I mean by weird.
Yeah.
It's not normal. It is not a normal thing to occur.
Yeah.
And so
how much of this or what degree of this is a choice? Like, I can imagine, and again, I am imagining because I haven't experienced this, gender dysphoria would be something that you discover about yourself, or something that is sort of you're confronted with, is this displeasure at your own biology and this desire for a different body or something. that to me doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of choice involved, in the same way that I might be confronted with Alzheimer's one day, you know? But I guess the choice to, well, certainly the choice for gender reassignment or sex reassignment, gender reassignment, what do they call it? Should be sex reassignment.
Yeah. Sex reassignment surgery.
That's a choice, to undergo that in an attempt to alleviate these symptoms of dysphoria.
Again, you have to call it something.
Yeah.
I don't like either of those words.
Yeah.
I don't think either of those things are happening when you have the surgery.
Yeah.
I don't think you can reassign your sex.
Right.
You can put something different. Again, the gender, the legal status.
Yeah.
You can put female down on your government forms, and maybe we should, for like legal forms, can we just add some questions in and call it a day?
Chromosomes?
Like, do we like the male assigned at birth thing? That's not my favorite language, but if that's what if we can all kind of understand that,
what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That there's really these two things, and again, there's intersex, very small percentage, but maybe we have people marked down when you get your DMV, your license, like a male assigned at birth, but I prefer to present as female.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But so all of that to say that I've at least heard in sort of Christian circles this idea or the sentiment that there's some degree of choosing that's happening here. You're choosing this lifestyle, or you're choosing to reject the way God made you, or something like that. And I just want to express a little more sympathy than that.
Yeah.
It's not just like flipping the bird to God and I reject that you made me a man or whatever. It's like you're confronted with some serious incongruence between the way you feel and the biology that you've got.
Yeah. So there's that. I totally agree with you. The other end of this, that I think what's causing so much cultural discussion on this, is that how it's presented in media is let's celebrate the way that God made you.
Oh, yeah.
And placing normative status on it as though this is a good and beautiful thing. Which I'm not denying. Like, you are, as a person, made in the image of God, meaning you have a free will and agency and the ability to make moral decisions. Awesome. But this status of having gender dysphoria, I view as not the way it's supposed to be, a privation of the good. This is sad that this has happened to you, and I want to come alongside you and love you in any way that we can, but it just seems incorrect in the book of all truths to say that is the way God designed you to be, to give you a male body and a female soul, to use that example again.
Right.
In the same way that there's a host of other really sad, weird, congenital birth defects that rob people of human flourishing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an analogy, and I'm going to think out loud.
Okay.
Maybe it'll be offensive. Maybe it won't. But that would... Okay. So you're suffering from gender dysphoria. You decide to start presenting as the opposite gender, let's say.
To alleviate
the symptoms.
To try to achieve phoria.
Congruence. Right.
I'm tired of dysphoria.
You want euphoria. So you now have gender euphoria. Yay, let's celebrate that. You're no longer suffering day in, day out because you've adjusted your lifestyle or whatever. And maybe that is worth celebrating, the alleviation of the symptoms. In the same way that somebody born with an extra hand that's not working coming out the side of their arm, or some mutation or genetic defect or something, maybe they have surgery to remove that. Hooray, now you've got a properly functioning arm. Let's celebrate that. But let's maybe not celebrate the fact that you had to go through it and that you were born with this dysphoric mutation or something.
Yeah.
Is that a fair analogy? I don't want to offend, but I'm just trying to...
I mean, I think you can basically pick anything that is classified as disorder as opposed to order. And there's a way that a human body, from our best science...
If those words mean anything.
I know, for real. Like, if we're ever going to use the word order again... or properly functioning, and this is the way. I mean, albeit I have blemishes, no doubt. But this is generally the way a male body will look when it reaches maturity.
Yeah.
And this is relatively properly functioning.
Yeah.
And sadly, that's not the case for some folks. And that is to be lamented. And we can grieve. We can come as a parent. If that happened, I would be sad about that. And I would want to come alongside my child and help them navigate that in the most wise, healthy way possible. But to say, I think it's just making a leap in logic to then give it a stamp of like normative status. Maybe, I don't know if it's fair to bring up cancer here, but that is a mutation of sorts. And I'm not saying transgenderism is a mutation or something. It's a little more complicated given that it's a psychological disorder, but, or rather gender dysphoria is. So in cancer, that is it's a disorder in the very general, literal sense of that term. Your body is not functioning the way it should, and it's leading to a lack of flourishing, not just because society is prejudiced against cancer people.
Right.
But because it's really bad to have cancer for a lot of other reasons. I think, and this is another, let's turn the gem again. This is another aspect of this where we need to be confronted. We need to confront the reality that there are genuine negative side effects to lasting impacts that you do to your body if you decide to make a full transition.
Like the reassignment surgery.
Yeah.
You're saying there's downsides to that.
And to just being gender dysphoric. Like it's...
Well, yeah.
I want to resist the notion that the only negative side effects of the mental disorder are because society isn't on board with transgender people.
Right.
I think just there's something about the human nature that it's bumping up against the way the world should be. Does that make sense?
I think so. I would think that what's bad about gender dysphoria is the felt experience of dysphoria. That regardless of what society thinks.
So here's like an open question for me that I need to do more research on, but there's like your chances of being a victim of suicide go way up post surgery, post reassignment surgery. Why is that? Is it because society isn't on board with this yet and you're being made fun of? Like, not to put it lightly, but you're just experiencing all these negative influences. Or is there something just about like what's been done to the body and feeling regret or remorse? And certainly people have reported that.
Have they?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, not all,
right,
but a certain amount. And it's something you can't really undo at this stage of technology.
This is where I don't know the stats at all.
Yeah.
Like,
and I didn't prepare well enough for that.
Like, do most folks who undergo that kind of surgery, are they pleased with it and it's resolved their dysphoria and they get on through life great? Or what's the proportion of people who regret it, people who would recommend it? But you're saying either way, suicide rates go up.
They do go up.
And the explanation for that is up for debate.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, for me.
Right.
Some people may have figured it out, but I don't feel like I have the evidence yet.
But it's at least something to pay attention to before we just hurriedly admonish everybody with dysphoria to go get reassigned. I don't know
if I have enough to say about this next little aspect, but the whole non-binary stuff really just, if I'm being totally honest, throws me for a loop.
Yeah.
And again, I need to be very clear here. Back to our initial distinction. Please write into the show if we have this all backwards, by the way, as well. But again, I think there's some confusion going on. If by non-binary you mean the lived role stuff, roles. And you want to invent a third role,
well, add as many roles as you want.
Okay.
Thousands of them.
A bird man.
Yeah.
Living in human society.
Live as the bird man.
And I've seen documentary stuff about the guy who wants to look like a tiger.
Oh, yeah.
And he's doctored up his whole body.
The lizard man, you've seen him?
I've seen him.
He's got a forked tongue and everything.
And so is that gender non-binary? It's certainly not human. He's not trying to be present as human.
Right. Is that a whole other category?
But again, if we're saying it's that term male female that's really thrown us.
Yes.
If we relegate those to sex and mean that, then I don't know if you can be gender non-binary.
Like some third sex.
You're not sex non-binary.
Right.
There's just the two.
Yeah.
Like you, yeah.
There's nothing between male and female.
I don't think so.
In terms of biology and sex.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, however you end up carving out the contours of this third or fourth or fifth gender that are not the masculine, feminine, male, female, and you would like to be called Zer or whatever term that you feel you like, by all means, attempt to live your life that way in the freedom-loving America that we're in.
Yep.
But to then say that, like, I am this other sex or something, I just feel like there's miscommunication that goes on there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Let's tie it. Do you want to talk about how this might apply to matters of faith, or is that?
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
I think it's worth touching on.
So one question that a thoughtful Christian might ask is, does the Bible say anything about this? Mm-hmm. Whether or not, I mean, you could be a Christian perhaps and not be too worried about whether the Bible talks about it, but let's just think about it for a moment. It's a pretty important, long-standing book in the history of humanity, so contains some wisdom in there. You have in Genesis 1:27 that God created mankind in his image. He created the male and female.
Yep.
Okay, so that sounds like it'd be relevant. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's something that's maleness and femaleness are rooted in the image of God, that the divine Godhead has these different traits.
Yeah.
And all wrapped up into this one being, and then created through whatever means these two sexes,
reflections of his nature.
Yeah.
So his, her, it's
right.
You know.
So there's something there to the sexes. I don't know if that right there gives you masculinity, femininity, and like these set boundary lines. Again, we discussed how that can fluctuate a little bit.
Yeah.
As for transgender, that's more difficult. You're not going to find that word in, at least so far. Maybe a new translation has come out or someone decided to put that in there. Now, one interesting word that is used relatively frequently is eunuch.
Yeah.
What's a eunuch? Well, Jesus talks about eunuchs.
Does he?
Yep. There's a really weird passage, Matthew 19:12.
Because I know Peter runs into one, right? He baptizes
that
the
is
eunuch.
Philip.
Oh, Philip, not Peter. Yeah.
So Jesus says this, "For there are eunuchs who were born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others. And there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it." Funny way of putting it. Thank you, Jesus. This is just to point out that, so Jesus knew about eunuchs. His audience did, right?
Yeah.
That he didn't need to explain it.
No, right.
And so typically it could be different depending on who it is and who might have done this to you. But it's usually castration.
Yep.
It's typically referring to males at this time period.
Yep.
There were, I'm sure, cases of female genital mutilation, but for the most part, it's talking about males. I don't know. There's two different parts of the male genitalia, broadly speaking.
Sure.
Sometimes they leave one, or sometimes it's all gone. Let the reader understand.
The balls in the bat.
Yep. Right.
Yep.
That euphemism isn't really that.
Not on balls. It's just that's balls. Yeah.
You didn't veil too much with that one. And so he's saying,
some are born that way and some were made that way by others. That's what he's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So is he referring to like intersex people who are born?
Perhaps, yes.
Wow. I wonder how common knowledge would that have been back then? Like if someone was born intersex, Is it known around town? Old Jimbo, he's intersex.
Well, because
he's a eunuch.
Good. So just to dovetail this with the Acts 8 story that you referenced with Philip. Sorry, let me pull it up here. I have it hot linked.
The Ethiopian eunuch.
It is the Ethiopian eunuch. Philip and the Ethiopian. Can I read this real quick?
Yeah, please.
Now an angel of the Lord said to Philip, "Go south to the road, the desert road, that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza." So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch, an important official in charge of all the treasury of, the Kandake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians.
Okay.
This is NIV version, by the way.
Got it.
This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home was sitting in his chariot reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. The Spirit told Philip, "Go to that chariot and stay near it." Then Philip ran up to the chariot, heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. "Do you understand what you are reading?" Philip asked. "How can I?" I'm not going to do an Ethiopian accent.
Yeah, that's wise.
"How can I," he said, "unless someone explains it to me?" So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. This is the passage of scripture the eunuch was reading. "He was led like a sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shearer is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation he was deprived of justice. Who can speak of his descendants? For his life was taken from the earth." The eunuch asked Philip, "Tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else?" Then Philip began with that very passage of scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. Okay, sorry, this is the crucial point.
It's okay.
As they traveled along the road, they came to some water. And the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized?" And he gave orders to stop the chariot. Then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. They came up out of the water. The Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away, which is bonkers.
Wild.
And the eunuch did not see him again, but went on his way rejoicing.
Okay.
And Philip did other stuff.
Yep.
So, sorry, really the ending there is what I wanted to focus on. But here's this whole story of a eunuch.
Mm-hmm.
And what is interesting is that, might be graphic. I find it a little bit comedic.
Okay.
But how we described what a eunuch is, that's not immediately apparent just by looking.
Not if you're clothed.
Unless you're, revealing.
Which they do in India. You know about this?
No, tell me.
Yeah. So in India, when I spent my time there, they warned us that there were these eunuch gypsies.
No kidding.
And they would walk around on the trains and they would do this, asking for money. They'd just demand money. And if you didn't pay them, up comes the skirt. They flash you and curse you, put a curse on you.
No.
Yeah.
Have you been cursed?
He
You can say he.
came up and did this to me, and I was like, "Sorry, man, I don't have any money." I was like, "I don't have any money. Sorry." And he said something that I didn't understand. I did not get flashed. He didn't lift the skirt, but he was cranky, and he walked on.
Oh, my word.
So
Okay.
I might have a hex on me. I don't know.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, but yes, not immediately obvious upon
That's a crazy
first glance.
story. You think it's going to give you nightmares.
Yeah, he's burned into my mind.
Yeah. Thank goodness I didn't go the extra mile.
I know. That would have been trouble.
So what's interesting, though, is that Philip is not... There's no confusion that this is a eunuch. Philip knows this is a eunuch.
Somehow it made its way into the story.
Right.
Yeah.
So that tells me one of two things. Either this was probably... So, like, in Jesus's classification, perhaps he was made a eunuch by someone else for a religious purpose, and thus wears special garb, let's say, that indicates that one is a eunuch, and maybe that has even pride of place. Like, he was the treasurer of the Queen of Ethiopia.
Yep.
Or...
Did he strip when he got baptized?
Or the intersex... that's interesting. I don't think so. Maybe.
You don't think so? I mean, he didn't want to get all his robes wet.
That's how we found out. That's funny. I don't know if it's funny, but
it's a possibility.
Or if it's... Here's what some commentators have tried to apply this to the transgender topic, is if this eunuch was the one born that way, then maybe they are in this intersex category. They've developed in such a way to not have the striking secondary features that help us.
They don't have a big beard or something.
Yeah.
Lacking in testosterone.
Yes.
You would expect a guy to have a lot of facial hair.
Effeminate? Is that an offensive word? But maybe...
I don't think so.
Looks that way. And so Philip realizes that. But here's what's so fascinating. here is some water. What can stand in the way of my being baptized? There was nothing about him being a eunuch that Philip said, no, you are not able to be baptized.
Yep.
And to me, that's saying something about that doesn't stop you from being favored by God in some way, or in the family of God, in the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
You are welcome.
You're welcome.
You are welcome.
Yeah.
And I guess that I want that to be my posture.
Right.
You are welcome in the family of God.
Yeah, and that might come as a challenge to some folks in the Christian community who I know would see it as, like, a transgender person as an affront to how God made them to be, or a rejection of the image of God that they're supposed to bear. There's some degree of discomfort, I think, commonly with transgender folks in church. I can certainly imagine a lot of churches across the country who would not have that welcoming attitude.
Right.
That it's somehow a sin, that lifestyle you're living is a sin. But
that's, so even though it sounds like, just forgive me if you're transgender and listening, speaking to you directly, forgive me if that it's offensive for me to refer to what you're going through as a mental disorder of gender dysphoria.
Right.
But what I, like, as someone just trying to make sense of it, what I think would be freeing about that is that, at least from my faith community and my social situation, that's just something that has happened to you by dint of the genetics. This isn't an assault on your character or your value as a person, whereas there are some faith communities that are attributing this is sin,
wickedness,
and it's worthy of eternal punishment and all sorts of stuff being thrown onto that. And I want to get rid of all of that.
Let's have compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah. For someone who's clearly suffering in some way. Yeah.
What's interesting too, just in that passage, I'm seeing here a footnote that says later manuscripts add, Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may be baptized. And the eunuch answered, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God.
Oh.
So they added in, like, they were kind of, I'm sure they were reading that. They're like, I don't think that eunuch said enough to indicate that he was really born again.
On board.
And so they added him saying, like, okay, make him say the right thing.
Yeah.
I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Okay.
Pro Jesus.
Now he's good.
Now you're in.
It's kind of interesting, but
yeah.
Maybe someone can pick up some other filaments in scripture that refer to this topic, but I think that's about it. Now, this is kind of a weird one. I don't mean to get into the topic of orientation necessarily in this conversation, but the only other, maybe not the only, one other indicator of this is in the King James Version, in 1 Corinthians 6:9, there's a whole list of some sins, and it talks about adulterers, fornicators, and the effeminate.
Oh, yeah?
And nor the effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind. And the NIV got rid of all of that and just said, nor men who have sex with men.
Right.
So, but just what's kind of interesting is, like, the King James, as opposed to the NIV, is known for, like, the word for word style of translation, whereas NIV is trying to get at the idea more. But there are these two words, malakos and arsenokoites.
Wow.
Arsenokoites. So these two words, and the malakos one is like effeminate, which we can wonder how to handle the passage, but at least that this word is being used is an indicator of something having to do with masculinity, femininity.
Yeah.
And describing a man who had, and the Greek Strong Concordance has it, of uncertain affinity, soft, fine clothing, figuratively. Just that's being used to describe a man, effeminate was the translated word. There's another instance of where the Bible makes use of feminine, masculine language.
It just seems to me like it can't be the case that, for example, as a man, wearing a particular item of clothing is a sin. Like for me to wear a dress would be sinful.
Deuteronomy 22:5.
Oh, he's got a verse ready to go.
Deuteronomy 22:5.
What does it say?
A woman must not wear men's clothing,
okay,
nor a man wear women's clothing.
Yeah,
for the
right.
Lord your God detests anyone who does this.
Oh man!
Now, even
that's funny.
even the most conservative evangelicals among us find ways to get out of that one. Like, that's the old law, old covenant.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that's super interesting. Like, what's men's clothing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what these aren't
Briefs?
fixed categories, man. Like these things change over time. Fashion changes over time.
And if I'm being honest, at least from what I've seen from Christmas plays,
Yeah.
Mary and Joseph's outfit
Very
is
similar.
not hardly different at all.
Yeah. You've got Scottish men wearing
Drab
kilts.
rags
Yeah.
and robes.
Yeah.
That is it. There's
Yeah.
no
So is it based on color?
There are no brassiers.
No.
There's no thongs. There's no jock straps. There's none of that stuff.
None of that.
Camisoles.
That's too funny.
There's just there's robes.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there
everyone's
is an
wearing
undergarment, but I don't know. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Should look into that.
Wow.
What is a
funny.
ancient Near East male clothing that a woman would never wear?
Yeah.
Beats the heck out of me. Anyway,
Don't know.
but they were concerned about it. Apparently, the Lord was
Big
too.
deal. Yeah.
So one topic here is just how to love well.
Mm-hmm.
How to love someone well that has gender dysphoria
Yeah.
and is transgender, and there's a whole journey that someone who identifies that way is going to go through.
Yeah.
And I think I know people in our church that are bumping up against the rubber meets the road in some scenarios. Like, are you going to use the new name
Yep.
that, like, if you came to me, Clint, I would like to be called Tonya.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like now I have a choice to make on whether to honor that request.
Yep.
Or preferred pronouns. There's I'm not going through this with anybody personally, so I'm kind of just freshly hearing these different scenarios. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Like, what do you do there?
Yeah.
So your biological son wants to get married, but identifies as a female.
Yep.
And typically the father walks the daughter down the aisle.
Yep.
So am I going to walk my son that I held in my arms and saw his biology before me? Behold my son, like Lion King, Simba,
Yeah.
is being Rafiki's displaying him. Am I going to walk him down the aisle like a daughter?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And is
Yeah.
that the loving thing to do?
What's the loving thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe the hardest issue for me when I think about for me to use somebody's preferred pronouns or whatever, that's not a big deal to me. I'm happy to do it. In the same way you have a preference to be called Clinton or Clint or whatever, I'm going to call you what you like to be called. That's fine. When it comes to somebody experiencing gender dysphoria and saying, I would like, or say my own son, when I have one, comes to me and says, I want to undergo the reassignment surgery. Will you pay for it?
Oh, man.
Well, then it gets complicated.
And they're an adult?
I don't know.
The child part,
I guess,
is a whole nother bag.
Yeah, that's a whole other bag. But like, is the loving thing to do? And this is where I just don't know. I don't have the stats. Is it the case that most people who undergo the surgery have their symptoms of dysphoria relieved? Hooray, happy life. Or is it that can it do more harm than good? What's the loving thing to do there?
I hear you saying you want to do the loving action is informed by evidence.
I am saying that.
Not
yes.
not just
The tug of the heartstring.
empathy.
Yes.
We talked about that in the
Yeah, we
last
did.
episode.
Yeah. I'd like to have reasons to think that what I'm doing is the best thing for them.
Beyond just people are feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
Is that crazy to think?
Just in the same way that, I don't know, if a heroin addict comes to you and says, please give me some heroin, I've got all these symptoms. Giving them heroin is probably not the most loving thing to do. Even though in that moment, if
You've
they're
disappointed them.
begging and crying for it, and it would immediately relieve some symptoms, you're furthering the problem. And so in the same way, I'd want to be sure that I wasn't doing that, making the problem worse, actually.
Yeah.
And the answer is not clear to me there.
And the thing is, like, I should have mentioned this earlier, but maybe it was obvious to the listener. Gender dysphoria and basically any mental disorder has varying degrees of severity. I encourage listeners there's this podcast called Theology in the Raw with this guy Preston Sprinkle. He actually just had a book come out last month called Embodied, all about this topic, and is doing a 4-part series inviting people with gender dysphoria and are transgender on the podcast. And there's this one gal that came on, like, I have gender dysphoria, but it's not very severe, so I don't feel like I don't refer to myself as transgender. I'm not tempted to get the reassignment surgery, but far be it from me to wear a dress or anything like that. Like, I just feel really uncomfortable with feminine artifacts from culture and stuff. So there's a whole spectrum of severity of that felt feeling. And so I'm wondering what I'd like to find out more about after we sign off here is, probably should have done it before, but here we are, a moment in time.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers. The cases where there is the most relief of dysphoria in post-surgery maybe are the cases where the dysphoria is most severe.
Right.
But then when the dysphoria was not as severe, but they still...
It can seem like an overstep and there's regret there or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting, man.
So it's hard, even the stats might not bear out, may not be action guiding for you. That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing about stats is that they give you information about a collective.
Yeah.
But for you in that moment
Case
as a parent,
by case.
you need to know the child and how severe is this?
Yeah.
Like, is this like you're on death's door and you need, like, honestly, like, what if they're facing suicide now?
Yeah.
They're so dysphoric.
Right.
And maybe this will help. Is it like that?
Yeah.
Or, and then there's a whole other spectrum of associated things.
Complicated topics.
It is, yeah.
Warrant careful thought.
Sorry if this went on a little bit longer than usual, but
I think it warrants it.
Yeah, there was a lot to
And I'm sorry
navigate.
if we stepped on landmines and if we offended you. We did give you that warning up front that was probably going to happen, but we're just trying to make sense of this, you know.
So as a summary, I think there is confusion on how we're talking about it. The people that are really upset with transgenderism think that you might mean you can change your immutable maleness and femaleness, and maybe some advice to those advocates to be a little bit more clear about what you mean. Because if you just mean changing the lived role, you could avoid a lot of the consternation from the more conservative
many fights
crowd.
That don't need to happen. Yeah.
Just clarity is king. I wonder.
Yeah. So if you found this conversation helpful and or you have something to add to it, if we missed something, if we have blind spots and you have a perspective to offer, of course, reach out. You can leave a comment on this video on YouTube or you can write to us. You got something to say.
And in fact, they just changed the algorithm apparently.
Oh my gosh.
And so comments are king.
Really?
If you if you want to support us, leave a comment.
That would be helpful.
That boosts it up in the hierarchy.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let us know what you think. You can also write to us, opentotruthpodcast@gmail.com, or visit our website, opentotruth.com, and there's a contact form there as well. We'd love to hear from you.
We also write about this every week on Wednesday or Thursday.
Oh, yeah. I can, in full honesty, endorse this because I don't write these weekly blog posts and emails that go out. Clint writes them. But they're bloody fantastic. And I know I'm biased because I'm his best friend. But, like, if you're interested in philosophy and you want bite-sized nuggets of thoughtful musings sent to your inbox, sign up for the email list. It's good stuff that he's writing. So I benefit from it. Yeah. Nice work.
Alrighty.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Stay curious.